The movie, set in 1938 Munich, begins with a Jewish man telling his daughter, Elsbeth, a bedtime story. After a heartwarming family moment, Elsbeth questions why the Germans despise them. Her parents reassure her of their safety. However, their peaceful night is disrupted by gunshots, and Elsbeth witnesses her parents' murder by Nazi soldiers. Later, in Kongershall, General George Patton shares Marcel Marceau's remarkable story to his troops after an Allied victory. In 1939, Strasbourg, France, a young Marcel performs a Charlie Chaplin impression at a brothel, captivating the indifferent audience. His act is interrupted by his father, Charles, who confronts him about his job. Marcel defends his passion for acting. Charles, after a moment of silence, reminds him of their butcher work the next day. The day after at Butchery Mangles, George, who is Charles's nephew, comes to convince Marcel to take up a job as an entertainer for Jewish orphans. Marcel, however, is resistant and comes up with various excuses. In the midst of their conversation, Marcel inadvertently makes an offensive remark that leaves George shocked and upset. Feeling remorseful, Marcel reluctantly agrees to take up the job. One morning, a group of 123 Jewish orphans, who tragically lost their parents to the Nazis, arrive at the border of France in a somber mood. Alain, a guard stationed at the French-German wall, is disheartened when he sees his overbearing brother Marcel waiting for the arrival of the Jewish orphans. Alain assumes that Marcel's presence will only complicate matters for the other workers. Later, at a castle owned by a French-Jewish humanitarian organization, the Jewish orphans are assigned to live there. Upon their arrival in the spacious bunk room, they become wildly excited, their energy levels too high for George and the other workers to manage. Amidst the chaos, Marcel sits quietly at one side of the room, lost in thought. Marcel uses hand gestures and mime to bring laughter to the distressed orphans. His performance captivates everyone, including his love, Emma. Later, at home, Marcel is found painting in his room when Charles questions his passion. Marcel deflects the question and leaves. At dinner, Charles expresses confidence that Hitler won't invade France, but his family believes they should prepare for the worst, including leaving France. A year has passed when Marcel, accompanied by Alain, makes his way to the castle owned by the French-Jewish humanitarian organization. They are greeted with cheerful welcomes from the Jewish orphans residing there. Following their arrival, Alain, with a sense of urgency, advises George and the rest of the workers to relocate the Jewish orphans to the southern part of France. He explains that it's risky to keep all the orphans in the castle. Initially, George is doubtful and reluctant to follow through with Alain's suggestion. However, he changes his mind when he is made aware of the potential dangers that could befall them if they remain in the castle. Sometime later, one morning, the Jewish orphans participate in a survival training exercise within the castle grounds. In an attempt to simulate a real-life scenario, they quietly take cover in the treetops, while Emma and Marcel play the roles of Nazi officers to instill fear in them. Amidst the serious atmosphere, Joseph, one of the orphans, bursts into laughter upon witnessing Marcel's comical performance. Alain advises him to take training seriously for future benefits. Later, Marcel and his colleagues hear a radio announcement about a mandatory evacuation within 10 days, prompting them to plan the evacuation of Jewish orphans. Emma, pondering the announcement alone, receives a rose from Marcel to cheer her up. One day, the Jewish orphan boys get haircuts, while George motivates them with a powerful speech. Marcel uses a horn to guide the Jewish orphans on their journey. They then head south with their belongings. In southern France, the 123 orphans are divided into smaller groups and are sent to various safe places. Marcel alters his passport by inscribing new details, while Emma and Alain discuss joining a resistance group. Marcel, on the contrary, is not in favor of a revolt, preferring a more gradual approach. Despite this, Alain continues to try and convince him to join the resistance. They later commend Marcel for his skill in forging his passport. In a different scene in Berlin, Germany, Lieutenant Klaus Barbie, the chief of the Nazi Gestapo, walks into a pub filled with men who are chanting loudly and cheerfully. He sits down and clinks his wine glass to draw everyone's attention. Disturbed by the circulating rumors, he angrily confronts them upon discovering that some Nazis are Jews and homosexuals. The men start to shout, "Heil Hitler!" This only provokes Lieutenant Klaus further. In a fit of rage, he violently beats a man to death right in front of him. In the quiet of the evening, Marcel and Emma, filled with emotion, escort Elsbeth to a church that will serve as her sanctuary. As they say their goodbyes, Emma spots Nazi officers in the distance. Reacting quickly, she plants a kiss on Marcel just as the Nazi officers draw near. The officers, with a hint of suspicion, demand to see their passports and caution them against wandering around so late in the future. Meanwhile, within the seclusion of a room in the church, Elsbeth silently tears a loaf of bread into two. To her delight, she discovers her freshly minted passport hidden within it, bearing a new identity bestowed upon her by Marcel. A smile graces her face as Marcel and Emma make their way back to their secret refuge. Marcel, driven by curiosity, inquires with Alain about the process of joining the resistance group in Lyon. Baffled, Alain questions Marcel's abrupt decision. Marcel, with newfound resolve, expresses his desire to confront their adversaries despite the inherent dangers. Touched by Marcel's transformation, Alain embraces him warmly. He then advises Marcel to seek their father's approval. That night, Marcel unexpectedly finds his father, Charles, performing opera on stage. He waits anxiously outside to confront him. Upon exiting, Charles is surprised to see Marcel, who has just discovered his father's secret passion for entertainment. Marcel questions why his acting dreams were discouraged, to which Charles explains his fear of the financial instability often faced by artists. This revelation brings Marcel a newfound understanding of his father, strengthening their father-son bond. Marcel later seeks Charles's approval to join the Lyon resistance alongside Alain, which Charles readily gives. Upon their arrival at Lyon's train station, Marcel, Mila, Emma, and Alain split up to avoid drawing attention. Suddenly, a Nazi officer apprehends Alain. Marcel quickly formulates a plan, causing a commotion by setting a Nazi officer on fire. Amidst the ensuing chaos, Alain escapes from the vehicle he was forced into. Mila and Emma, from inside a moving vehicle, shout out for Marcel and Alain as they all manage to flee the station. Shortly after, they reach the secret base of the Lyon resistance. Concurrently, Lieutenant Klaus observes a queue of individuals at the Gestapo headquarters, discovering they're trading information about resistance groups for rewards. In the meantime, Dominique, a key figure in the Lyon resistance, assertively demands Marcel to expedite the forging of passports for 20 French fighters within an hour. Feeling the pressure, Marcel complies. In the near future, Dominique, along with other members of the group, departs in the company of Marcel to covertly greet the British combatants. Marcel hastily prepares the passport inside their transport. Subsequently, at a Gestapo swimming pool, members from a different resistance faction line up. Eventually, Lieutenant Klaus makes his appearance and mercilessly executes them individually. After a period of time at the Resistance's secret base in Lyon, Emma accidentally sees Mila and Alain in an intimate moment after her bath. When Mila goes back to bed, Emma remains awake, pleasantly shocked by Mila's clandestine romance. As they engage in a hushed conversation, the sound of continuous gunfire draws nearer to their hideout. Their primary aim is to flee, but they end up being apprehended by the Nazis. In the meantime, Alain, from a distance, unexpectedly witnesses Mila and Emma entering a Nazi vehicle in fear, along with other members of the resistance group from Lyon. He quickly leaves the area to join Marcel and the rest of the group. During this time, Dominique gets a signal indicating the approaching fighters. The fighters reach their location via parachute and promptly depart with them in their vehicle. Alain, narrowly avoiding being hit by Dominique's moving vehicle, he immediately updates them about the situation at their hideout. At the same time, at the Gestapo's swimming pool, Emma, Mila, and 2 other women stand in a line. They cry in fear as they face the prospect of being executed one by one. Lieutenant Klaus ruthlessly attacks 2 other women, leaving Emma and Mila alive. As Lieutenant Klaus makes his way to the swimming pool, he forcefully pulls Emma along. Simultaneously, Mila remains and tearfully pleads for him not to take her away. Emma, despite being chained, keeps her calm, while Lieutenant Klaus intimidates her. He briefly departs to seize Mila next, then ruthlessly kills Mila while interrogating Emma about the resistance group in Lyon. Soon after, Emma is released from the Gestapo's base. A Nazi officer awards her with a war axe pin on her chest for her cooperation. In a state of shock, Emma walks despairingly until she arrives at the train station in Lyon. Subsequently, she contemplates suicide and waits for an oncoming train. Fortunately, Marcel rushes to her rescue. One mournful morning, Olan is devastated to learn of Mila's murder. In the meantime, Emma is gearing up to retaliate against the Nazis, especially Lieutenant Klaus. Marcel, however, persuades her to support the Jewish orphans instead of engaging in a futile fight. Emma remains doubtful until Marcel assures her of the promising future awaiting the orphans beyond Nazi territories. Emma eventually agrees to his plan. Later at night in the south, Marcel convenes with George and other workers at their old hideout. Marcel then plans to guide a small group of Jewish orphans through a snowy hill to Switzerland, a safe haven. Subsequently, he goes to the church where Elsbeth is, warmly inviting her and the other orphans to join him. After a while, the small group of Jewish orphans, dressed as scouts, embarks on a train journey with Emma, Olan, and Marcel. George tearfully watches as the orphans say their goodbyes. Later, Charles is lured to a Nazi building under the pretense of a meeting for visas for foreign Jews. However, it's a trap, and he, along with other Jews in the building, is taken captive. On the train, Elsbeth reaches out to Emma, offering comfort for her loss. Shortly Shortly after, Emma spots Lieutenant Klaus outside the window as the train halts at Lyon Station. She quickly conceals herself as Lieutenant Klaus enters and inspects the train car. Promptly, the Jewish orphans start singing. When they pause, Lieutenant Klaus requests their passports, which Marcel has prepared beforehand. The orphans resume their singing, providing a distraction for the lieutenant. Lieutenant Klaus scrutinizes Marcel and, after a personal inquiry, lets him go, oblivious to Emma on the train. Later, Marcel's group traverses a snowy hill near Montreal, close to the Swiss border. Concurrently, Klaus heatedly disputes with his wife at Gestapo headquarters when a Nazi officer interrupts, revealing a tortured priest. Klaus learns the destination of the Jewish orphans he previously encountered and orders a squad to join him. As Marcel's group rests on the hill, Nazi soldiers arrive for a search. With agility, they take refuge in the treetops. Mimicking their prior training, they succeed in deceiving the Nazis without making any superfluous noise. One after another, they descend from the tree in silence and make their escape. Eventually, Lieutenant Klaus discerns their movements and yells to stop them. In response, Marcel and the rest of the group continue their frantic dash until they come upon a cliff. As the Nazi soldiers close in on them rapidly, Marcel urgently instructs the others to leap off the cliff. However, before she can make her escape by jumping, Emma is struck in the back by a bullet from Lieutenant Klaus. Despite this, Marcel and the rest of the group manage to survive the ordeal. Emma breathes her last, with Marcel calling out her name until she passes away. As Marcel and the group rest in the snow, a hunter offers them assistance. They later discover they've successfully fled France and reached Switzerland, bringing immense relief to the Jewish orphans. The story concludes with General Patton recounting Marcel's heroic deeds to a large crowd of soldiers. Marcel, dressed as a mime, is about to perform for the soldiers, who greatly appreciate his extraordinary performance. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.